Dating as a male in the US is complicated. We have words like thought, chad, soy boy, alpha male, and pick-me girls. There are apps like Tinder and Hinge, which are great for producing dopamine, but pretty awful at making actual connections. College seems to be the only place where you can really let loose and meet girls. And if you aren't willing to put yourself into eternal debt for that, you are alone. In this patriotic land of freedom we call the USA, there were 689,000 divorces just this year, which is more people than the state of Wyoming. More couples are meeting online than any other form, even passing mutual friends and parties. The Me Too movement is killing men's confidence. Nobody wants to be accused of sexual assault, and women are looking exclusively for low-commitment situationships with the top 1% of guys. In my experience, it seems like opportunities to bond with people are disappearing. The Thriving Center of Psychology tells us 56% of singles feel like dating is harder now than in previous years. Our parents had it better off, and figuring out why is not as easy as it seems. So, how did this happen? How did we go from our parents settling down and having kids in their 20s to impulsive flings being the norm? Welcome to IQ 42, and today we will be exploring the evolution of dating throughout human history. Let's start from the beginning. In caveman times, life was simple. The men would go out to hunt, they'd set a plan beforehand, and then everyone would shut up and execute. There was no room for emotion, there was no time to argue. If you did, you were the reason the buffalo ran away. Meanwhile, the women of the tribe were taking care of the kids and managing the social aspects for life. For the women, silence was not a necessity, and rather the opposite was important. Strong social connections were required to keep the tribe functional and to help raise the children. Those women who were the best at this were put in charge. The men simply worked their butts off to provide for the tribe. The women took care of the tribe life. Dating in these times was non-existent. The most successful hunters had many wives, and those who failed to provide failed to reproduce. This is the foundation of sexual selection, which is the less popular evolutionary theory of Darwin's. Darwin argued that sexual selection was equally, if not more important than natural selection, and it's pretty clear why. If a female prefers mating with those who have better capabilities for protection and survival, and avoids those males with traits that lead to extinction, like poor bone structure or digestion issues, the species as a whole is better off. This can be well represented by the ever-growing height of human beings. Many people assume that the ever-rising average male height is due to better nutrition and health. That simply isn't the case. Even in times of great famine, the average height rose. Why? Because females simply prefer dating taller men. And whether you agree or not, the data supports that. Does nutrition help? Sure. But those shorter males would never get a chance to create offspring, and the short gene gets outcompeted by the tall one. All this came to an end as soon as society started popping up. Damn society. Now that people were in much larger social groups, and the economic social ladder involved much more than simply killing the largest beast, it mattered a lot more who you ended up having kids with. Being a couple was no longer just a process to prevent extinction, but now it also had social implications. It mattered what name you married into, what race, what social class. This period of human existence saw the rise of long-term, monogamous marriages. Males no longer picked the females they found most attractive, females no longer picked the man who could get the most food. With people settling down into cities and growing into places of massive populations, the concept of security had changed drastically. One man could no longer be alpha by consistently bringing home the most hunting spoils. In this new system, men worked on farms, and cooperation was more important than individual strength. The system needed to be changed. Our animalistic urges had to be suppressed to make room for society. This period of civilization building simultaneously saw the rise of arranged marriages. People forget that for a majority of human history, It was unthinkable to base your marriage on silly feelings like love and attraction or emotional bonding. To do that was to go against society and was considered irresponsible behavior. The common practice was for the family to choose a suitable partner. What made a partner suitable? That varied by culture. In Europe, it was very common for families to use their children as leverage to move up the social ladder. Royals would strictly marry within royal blood, and such a small pool of suitable couples eventually led to inbreeding. Just take a look at this fella. Yep, that's European arranged marriages for you. This ugly creature is King Charles II. He's the last king of the Habsburg Spanish Empire. He's a product of an uncle and niece having a child. The whole thing was a power grab. Charles suffered because of it. He was severely disabled and mentally challenged, but hey, the Habsburgs got the crown. It wasn't much better for the lower classes either, though. Peasants also used their children as bargaining chips to consolidate land and to gain better opportunities. Most girls were given away to husbands as soon as they had their first period, indicating fertility. This usually occurred at age 14 to 16, and they often had no say about who they were going to spend the rest of their lives with. Meanwhile, in India, a much more refined system existed within the Hindu religion. Rather than the only consideration being social class, families based marital decisions on many more factors. The largest being the compatibility of the bride and groom's families. Yeah, wealth and caste hierarchy were considered, but families were careful in picking a bride and groom they thought had compatible families. They would take great care in picking a partner that was vetted by the uncles, aunts, grandmas, and grandpas. Both families would take each other into consideration. They would often take years figuring out what two families had the best chance with each other. In the Hindu religion, life only truly starts with the holy union of marriage. There, marriage comes first, and then love, not the other way around. That's why they took such care in picking a union that was agreed upon by all parties involved. In my opinion, it's no coincidence that India has a divorce rate of 1%, making it the lowest on the planet. Something both systems had in common is the absence of sex before marriage. Understandably, women had to be much more careful in a world with zero contraception. No condoms, no plan B, no birth control. One lucky night and you have 9 months and 18 years of responsibility. People had to be very careful, so of course they couldn't trust their gut of who to marry and who to bond with. Society had to be careful, and they did this by having the family supervise any sort of relationship. Those who didn't were considered uncivilized. This can be seen even by the way cultures treated furniture, like in medieval England, where the legs of chairs were covered as a way to discourage sexual desires. Yeah, they took it that far, but once again, it was for a good reason. Then, things started to change. In London, 1597, Shakespeare writes the play Romeo and Juliet. Telling the tale of a forbidden love between two aristocratic families, its popularity demonstrates how many are unhappy with their assigned marriages at this point of history. People were fantasizing for real love. Then, in 1761, Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote the book Julie. It became the fastest-selling book at the time, and it offered something truly revolutionary. The book tells the story of an aristocratic woman, Julie, who's expected to marry someone of her social class. Despite this, she ends up falling in love with her English professor, a commoner. Doesn't sound that interesting compared to the 1,000 Netflix romance movies we have now, but this book was one of the first to suggest relationships should be based on love, and that was groundbreaking. It made many question the foundation of their unhappy relationships, while also bringing light to the possibility of dating across the social classes. Then, in 1855 comes out the novel I Viceré, or The Viceroys, by the Italian author Federico de Roberto. In it, two characters fall madly in love, but are forbidden to marry each other by the male character's mother. Crucially, the mother is made to seem old-fashioned in the book, on the grounds that picking a partner based on societal traditions was becoming old-fashioned, and picking one based on instinctive feelings like love and attraction would result in a much happier marriage. Until this point, most couples had never dated, just been assigned. If they did, it was under close supervision of parents and by no means a normal practice. These pieces of literature had captured a change in society. where the younger generations were going against their parents and listening to their hearts. Ideas of love really started to make their way into the mainstream, and by the time of the American Civil War, arranged marriages were no longer the norm. America greatly benefited from this cultural shift. The country was made up of immigrants, and the social classes were being built from the ground up, not like in Europe, where they had existed for centuries. In the New World, they also lacked the larger families that existed in Europe, which made this type of dating even easier to adopt. During this period of time is also when the idea of casual sex really started to emerge, and there's one product that made that happen: condoms. Condoms have been around since ancient Egypt, often being made from animal skins. However, these condoms were very expensive and were only used by wealthy aristocrats. This all changed in 1839 when Charles Goodyear discovered he could vulcanize rubber in a chemical process. That basically means he found a way to make tree rubber easier to manipulate and work with. Charles died broke, but this technology is what led to the creation of rubber tires by the Goodyear Company, and more importantly, cheap and effective condoms. By the time of the Civil War, condom use exploded alongside the rise of modern dating. Flash forward to 1960, when the US Food and Drug Administration approved the world's first birth control pill. Now the power of contraception was not just for men, but for women too. Things really started unraveling here. The old ways of dating were not only on their way out, but were deeply unfavored by newer generations. The rise of the hippie counterculture movement in the USA was undoubtedly assisted by the invention of female contraception. Women were able to have more control over their lives than ever before in human history. That was only furthered by the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court case, which in brief is the case that declared the constitutional right to abortion. People were getting fed up with the old ways of the world. Times were changing, and so was the dating world. The hippie movement involved massive amounts of drugs, sex, and overall experimentation. Then came the internet. 1995 saw the emergence of Match.com, the world's first online dating site. With it came a huge spike in the number of interracial and same-sex couples. Then in 2009, out comes Grindr, which is the most popular gay app in the world. 70% of all same-sex couples meet online through apps like Grindr. Then, in 2012, out comes Tinder, and that leads us to today. The scene is set. It took a few thousand years, but we have gone from pure instinct-driven relationships in the Stone Age to relationships being a very strict and supervised process, and full circle back to instinct-driven relationships, but with a touch of capitalist consumerism and digital technology. So, what's the lesson here? Why the hell do I need to know about the history of all this dating stuff just to find out everything sucks? I'm not entirely sure, but what I do know is not all hope is lost. Real meaningful relationships are definitely possible. Everyone is so distracted by all of the products available to us, but if we take a few moments to remove the distractions, deep inside, I think everyone just wants intimacy, either physical or emotional. You probably won't find that on dating sites. I can't help but think back at the astonishingly low divorce rates within Hinduism. They're doing something right. They learned through generations that, of course, basing a relationship on just one thing can't lead to a successful marriage. You can't base a relationship on just the opinion of the parents or just attraction. It's a holy union, not just between two people, but their families, their material possessions, their traumas. Ultimately, dating is so hard in the modern world because we are misguided into thinking that they're based on simple things. On Tinder, it's just looks. For many others, it's just money. Too often, it's just hype. Our culture is obsessed with results and quantifiable ones. Relationships aren't quantifiable. They're complicated. They always have been, but now we tried to simplify it, and of course that doesn't work. At the end of the day, all one can do is work on yourself, and if a relationship is meant to be, it'll come your way. The relationships you see on your screens are just distractions anyway. Thanks for watching all the way through. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. If not, I hope you at least learned something. Peace out.